Hello there, people of the internet. My name is Uturi Jagero, and this is Dialogues with Jagero. Today, we are with Scholar Meek Wanjiru, who has written a book called Coming into the Awareness of the Self. Each and every one of us is coming into adulthood from a childhood that might be having a lot of trauma, a lot of things that they do not understand, asking questions, why did my parent have to do this to me? You know, and he told me very well that, they might have been struggling with their own issues too.
True.
I want us to talk about you and then talk about children and talk about adults and adulting.
Yes.
So it is correct to say that most of us have been character developed by our childhood.
Yes. Generally, life has character developed us. And this is through all experiences.
Yeah.
And the earliest environment is where most of the imprints are. And the most important thing to realize is that within you is another person, what we refer to as the inner child. I don't know if you're familiar with the Russian dolls.
No.
The Russian dolls, those dolls, you remove one, you get another one inside. You remove another one, you get another one inside. So say, for example, today is your 9th birthday, okay?
Yes.
You're 9 years old. You have 9-year-old kind of experiences, all right? Those experiences are imprinted through your thoughts, the way you think, your emotions, your perceptions, all right? Then next year, you're going to turn 10. The 9-year-old is still within you. So the experiences of the 9-year-old are going to be carried forward to the 10-year-old. So the perceptions you had as a 9-year-old, the beliefs from the experiences you had as a 9-year-old will be carried over. Now, this is the same thing, your childhood. The experiences gave you core beliefs. Now you've carried them into adulthood. And now you are reacting in ways that you yourself sometimes do not understand. Have you ever reacted to something and you're like, that is not me? I mean, where did that come from? It came from your inner child or your shadows.
Yeah. So let's talk about you. Every guest of mine has to give me a little bit of who they are, where they are coming from. So who is Scholar? You talked to me about church trauma.
Yes.
I think a lot of us who are in church have carried a little bit of trauma from our churches. But I want to know a little bit about your life, our audience, and people that I know are going to watch this video, people that you've worked with, people that you've helped, are going to, love to learn about you.
Yeah.
You, first of all, your names. This is Scholastica, or what is this name in
Yeah, Scholastica Wanjiru.
Scholastica Wanjiru, yes.
And then I got into music ministry in church. And the pastor that was raising us at that time told us to come up with a nickname that characterizes your ideal self, who you would want to be. So I would consider myself kind of arrogant, or I was arrogant at that time. And the quality I really wanted to develop at that time was the quality of meekness.
Humility.
Yes, humility.
I think they talk about it in the Bible.
Yes, yeah. Now everybody in church at that time was told, come up with a name. So, for example, my mom came up with the name Splendor. She was widowed at a young age, and she actually felt like she needed to glow more, the experience. So she came up with the name Splendor. Okay, so I came up with the name Meek. Okay, so everybody actually knows my mom as Splendor. Everybody knows me as Meek. And then now when I did my music, my praise and worship music, that's the name I used, Scholar Meek. So it stuck from church. So this name is from church, from ministry. And talking in terms of shadows, we've said that this happens in your childhood, right? For me, my shadows developed in church, not so much in the home. Because your shadows can develop in the home. They can develop at work, because
What are shadows?
Shadows are aspects of yourself that you've hidden because they are not acceptable. You have disowned, you have self-rejected because your outside external environment has told you you're not going to be loved when you have those aspects. So you hide them away and you form a shadow self. So there is scholar, the light scholar, the conscious scholar, the outward scholar, who you would say
So shadow is the fake you,
the false you, yeah.
the false you.
Yes, the false you. And then
And why are you trying to have the false you?
you're not trying to. It just happens because parts of yourself have not been accepted. Let me give you an analogy. So a child is born, happy-go-lucky, right? Excited, starts singing, dancing, what. And then maybe a parent or a caregiver tells them, don't do that in front of the visitors. That is not acceptable. So because a child does not have the processing, logical, reasoning capacity to think of why am I being told this is not good, to think through it and decide, no, I'll still do it. They believe what you're telling them, that this is not acceptable. So that dancing, singing, happy-go-lucky kid self-rejects. And because nothing just goes anywhere, that thing is stored. Okay? And when it is stored, wherever it is stored, it becomes a shadow. So in spiritual terms, we can say we live in duality. There's light and dark, there's yin and yang. So the shadow is the dark aspect of yourself. It is still there. It's that you've chosen not to see it because you want to be accepted by your caregivers. So you hide it away. And sometimes they are dark aspects. That an example I've given you, those are nice things like dancing and singing. So that's a gift they're called golden shadows. That's a gift you've hidden. So it's possible that you would have become a big artist. But what were you taught in childhood? That is not acceptable. Don't dance, don't. So you'll never get to be the Michael Jackson. You'll never get to be the Beyonce unless you integrate that shadow. Now that is bringing things to the surface, right? That's what we call the shadow self. Now there are dark shadows and there are the light ones. Okay, these terms were coined by Carl Jung, the psychologist, who said that if you do not make the unconscious conscious, it will show up in your life and you will call it fate. So people are walking around as their shadow selves and they think that's who they are. But that's not who they are. But intuitively they know, because human beings are multifaceted. You have your ego self. This is the conscious self that you identify with, where the one you relate to the external world. You've got now the personal unconscious, the subconscious mind, where every experience you have, all your fears, everything is stored, right? You've got your metaphysical self, the one I was talking about, the energetic self, where you have the aura that is 6 feet from you, and that can also be read, it can also be healed, it can be damaged, it can be blocked. And then you have your mystical self. Your mystical self is the one that worships God. It's the one that involves religion and spirituality. So you have all these parts of yourself. Now, the greatest challenge we have as human beings is the conflict between these parts.
And that is, and I think let's now tie it to your story.
Yes. So I was born into a Christian family, and naturally, I gravitated towards things of the church. And let me say, I enjoyed it because I was in music ministry and media. And in hindsight, I would like to say that I don't want to offend anyone, but I'd like to say that the person that I was a conditioned self. It was not me authentically. Because what happens is you're raised into a family of doctors. That's the energy in that family. So you will be raised and you're like, when you grow up, you're going to be a surgeon and everything. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes that is not the path of everyone. So I come from a family of women of God, men of God, preachers, intercessors, praise and worship leaders. So I naturally gravitated that way. And I did it with my whole heart. I was very, very committed to it. But something was off for me. I felt like I was not being myself. One thing that I really felt that affected me was they really did not like me. I felt the church did not like me because I did not conform to some of the ideologies of the church. I used to question a lot of doctrine. I used to question a lot of dogma. Especially there's one scripture that used to really bother me, that may he increase so that I can decrease. It really used to bother me, like, why do I have to decrease? Aren't I important?
What do you think was the meaning of this, of the verse?
To me, at that time, I understand there could be another meaning, but at that time, I was just fresh. I was a teenager when I ventured into this. So to me, the way I interpreted it was like, who I am is not good. I need to change and become this other person. So the Spirit of God has to increase in me so that I can decrease. But I liked myself. I liked who I was.
Do you feel that Christianity sometimes make us, we think of God as the Almighty, and then we think of ourselves as tiny particles.
That's the message.
You know, like the tiny elements, like the sands in a beach.
That's the message. That's the message you get.
Yeah.
The message of we are born of sin or from sin. Just from that statement, you've already created a shadow within me, because you have already made me feel like I am not accepted the way I am because of the doctrine. And now I have to hide aspects of myself so that I can fit in. And I keep telling people that the church is one of the places where shadows are really formed, because people call it hypocrisy. You hide things. But really what you do is you self-reject. And you start walking around as a false self in church.
Let's talk about church. Because don't be afraid, because I'm also raised in church.
Yes.
And I have always thought of myself as an outsider in church.
You and me both.
You know, because first of all, I have been an artist, and I remember the church has always looked at me as somebody who doesn't conform.
Rebel.
For example, I think I'm one of the first people that wrote a very long letter to my provost, complaining about, and copied the entire PCC. That is the All Saints Cathedral Church, you know? And then there is a time I had a very serious fight with one of the PCC members who had said that we do not need the money to do the drama that of the script that I'd written. So they looked at the script and they thought that the script is not biblical. I wrote a story called The Color of God. So The Color of God was depicting Paul as somebody living today. So it was The Color of God 2, the color of God 1, The Color of God 2, and The Color of God 3. And then I wrote another play called what is the name of that play? I now forget the name of the play. But it was about Jesus having a very human connection with the lady that mwenye alimpaka mafuta. What
Magdalene.
was Mary Magdalene, you know? And the way I blocked that play was like, I really wanted that lady to look like a prostitute that she is. But the church had a big problem having a woman scantily dressed in church, you know?
Yes.
And throughout my life, I am somebody who has always wanted to talk about things, you know? And I have felt like if you are Christianity, especially if you call yourself a born-again Christian, there are things you can't say. You can have them in your thoughts,
Yes.
but you really, really can't say them.
Yes.
So you even as a Christian posting on Facebook, I am being told to calm down a lot by my friends in church
I know,
that don't want
I
like
know.
my posts are very human.
I know. I'm actually wondering if we are the same person, because I have experienced that a lot when I started my awakening journey, because now the process of leaving church and pursuing other avenues of spirituality, is what we call the awakening journey, I had all my relatives on my Facebook. They were my friends. So when I started posting some of these things, they would report me to my mother. And my mom, let me tell you something about my childhood. We are talking about the inner child. So the inner child, everyone has an inner child, but now you can have a wounded inner child. As I have said, my shadows were formed in church trauma. I did not experience that at home.
Church trauma.
Yeah, I like to call it church trauma because that's what it was, because I had to unlearn a lot of things. Like, I had to learn that I can speak my mind, that I used to be suppressed. This is what I cannot say in church. I mean, a pastor or a pastor's wife will come to you and tell you, oh, by the way, when you're leading worship, don't say 1, 2, 3. You know, stuff like that. So at home, I was seen, I was heard, and I was loved, right? So I want you to imagine a scenario of me at home, seen, loved, heard, and then I have gone to church as a full-time minister. And then they have started to tell me, you cannot say, you cannot do. You know, now they've started to suppress my creativity. Okay? They completely turned me into a shell of my former self. I was angry. That time I was doing ministry, I was an angry person. Even if you ask the people I used to serve with, they'd tell you, Scholar, usimkaribia unless it's really necessary. Because I used to be triggered very easily. Now, in hindsight, I understand what the triggers were about. Because they had suppressed a part of me, they had wounded me. And a part of me was not able to come out. And by the time I was walking away, I remember when I left ministry and I said, okay, I can't do this anymore. I first told my mom, because my mom was very supportive of me serving in church. I told my mom, I can't. I'm done. And because I did not want to talk to the pastor, because convincing me to stay would have been very easy, I went very early in the morning, took all my things from the office. Then I told the secretary, tell the pastor I have quit. And that's how I left.
You left church?
Work. Okay, that time it was work. I was working 8 to 5 in a church.
So did you leave church or you left working at church?
I was angry. I left even church. You could not tell me
I want us to be very, not to leave, to leave this
the story of the church.
The story of the church in a sort of bad way. Because as a matter of fact, I think that for me, church was a very important part of my life. There are things I didn't like about the church, but I also believe that my being in church saved me from a lot of things. Because in my family, it was a family of alcoholism. My father was an addict. My mother was a housewife that was very troubled because of the sickness in my family. My brother died of cancer, leukemia, and because of the alcoholism of my father, it was the family was in chaos. At some point, my mother was selling alcohol, changa in the village, and my brother was already addicted to alcohol. My sister was married off, had left a child at home. My other sister was having a problem with her marriage. And so it was a very dysfunctional family. And so for me, I ran to church. Yes. And when I went to church, I think I got a path out of that problem. And I always say that if I had not gone to church, I would be dead. Because I would have gotten into alcoholism. I would not have finished school. So I think that my faith in God is what kept me in school. And I prayed a lot as a child and in my early adulthood for God to direct me. Part of me coming to Nairobi was actually waking up in the morning at 4 and praying to God and telling God that my family cannot afford education, but I want you to give me education. I want to get out of this village, go to Nairobi, and I want you to take care of me in the city. And I came here to live with somebody that I did not ask. I just told God, please speak with him because me, I've got no language of speaking to him. Yes. And I came to that house and that guy did not talk to me about it. He let me stay there for 2 years. Wow. You know, I went to college. I did not have a single cent. The college fee was 95,000 every year. I went there by faith. I prayed to God that I don't want these guys to. It became so difficult, and then at some point, they told me that you can't stay in school anymore. But then I wrote a letter to the principal and told the principal that there is nobody who is paying for my school fees, and they gave me they wrote off all my debt and gave me scholarship for the rest of my education. So in that way, I know that there is a big place that the church, a very big part that the church played in my life. I am very cognizant of the bad things that I saw in church. And so for me, I always say that if you are in church, you must be like somebody eating fish. If you're eating fish, there are things in fish you don't eat. You don't eat the tail, you know?
Oh, you don't?
You don't eat the tail. You eat the tail to a particular point. If it is fried, you can crunch the tail. But when you cook it, it's not very nice. Yes. Then there are bones. Like, for example, the mudfish. It has got hundreds of bones in it. You, as a Luo, there is a way we were taught of how you put it all in and the bones just come out.
Interesting.
You know, the bones just come out and you don't eat it. You give it to the dogs. You know? So for me, I've always thought that if you're in church, you got to know the bones. Because if you eat that fish with the bones, you get really in a bad place. Because I feel like church is one place that is very dangerous.
Very dangerous.
You know?
Extremely dangerous.
Yes, it can be very, very dangerous. But if you know how to eat that church, if you know how to eat it like, you know how to eat the fish, then for me, I have a problem with tithe. And I even tell my pastors, you know, we used to say that bring ye these things into the house of God so that the people, the widows, and the orphans can eat. Do we have orphans that are eating in church today? I don't know.
No accountability.
Yes. Well, you can't go to church and sleep there. Church used to be open doors. You can go there, ukiwa 45, and you've been kicked out of your house. You can go to church and sleep there. Nobody. Today, the church is open using a fingerprint.
Which ones are those? The ones in the village don't have fingerprints. Wow.
You know?
Now, I would let me interject there and say, you see, what you're saying, you're speaking from an adult self.
Yes.
Now imagine me, who went to church as a child, who it was like a way of babysitting some of us. Morning glory, lunch hour, evening meeting, camps. I used to go for camps. I used to go for camps every holiday. You know, like you close school on Friday, Monday, Christian camp. You know, your life is occupied by but you're a child. They say children are like sponges, you know. So if you tell me I am not good enough because I am made of sin, the kind of impact that has on my psyche is very different from somebody who gets born again maybe at 2021. Okay? So what you've programmed the inner child is you've for one, you've shamed the child because of course no one is perfect. So there are a few things that you'll do in your childhood that you'll steal here and there, tatukanana here and there, skari umeiba skari nini. So you are told you are born of sin and all that, so you are shamed, okay? So you're walking around with that shame shadow into your adulthood. Imagine the amount of unlearning you need to unlearn in adulthood in order for you to be able now to integrate and heal and become now the secure person that you are supposed to be.
What I then think, in as far as church is concerned, is that the people that are leading us in church are very ignorant about, first of all, what a child is.
Yes.
What you should give to a child, what you shouldn't give to a child. And I feel like...
Like, for example, the doctrine of heaven and hell. are you telling a Sunday school child about the burning flames of hell? You've already introduced a fear shadow in that child. So this will be an adult who is going to walk around in life afraid.
I think because then, as you have said, there is no point of talking to them about hell and heaven at that particular age.
There is really no point.
But you see, what I was saying before, you mentioned that was that we are also led by people that do not understand how humans work. Imagine if a pastor knew about what you know right now.
Exactly.
The way they will approach life.
Yeah.
But you see, we in Christianity, we like a lot of shouting Bible verses. And not being very honest about what exactly. That is why I think people lose faith and then they start doing crazy things.
Let me give you an example. When I was serving in ministry, there was this time I was given a mandate of, you see the way people walk into church and they need help. I was given a mandate of talking to these people, finding out what their problem is, and then we decide whether this problem of yours should go to the pastor or we can handle it down here. So one of the things that I noticed is that some of these people had psychological issues, emotional issues, that laying my hands on you or praying for you will not solve the problem. What you need is counseling. What you need is anger management. Some of the wives used to come and say, my husband drinks too much, what you need is an addiction therapist, you know. And I remember one time, I remember I said to one of the youth pastors that you people don't know how to solve problems. Laying hands on an addict will not make an addict automatically stop drinking. You need to take them through maybe Alcoholic Anonymous, counseling, maybe take them to
the blood of Jesus.
to rehab.
Friend, the blood of Jesus.
So the blood of Jesus will not make this person stop drinking or this man to stop beating up the wife, what need anger management and stuff. And I was told it's all under the blood. And it became a big issue for me because I realized people are coming in with their problems in church and walking out with them. Then coming next week with the same problem and walking out with it. And I told one of the pastors that you are ignoring the psychological, you are ignoring the emotional in favor of the religious. I won't even call it the spiritual, because spiritual encompasses the psyche and the emotional. I will call it the religious. And it's one of the reasons I left, because now for me, I realized I was angry. Okay, and being laid hands on and the blood of Jesus were not solving the problem for me. So I needed to find alternative solutions to get out of this shadow phase I was in, because being in ministry was even making me afraid to express myself. And I was such an expressive, bubbly child, but they suppressed that because there's rules. This is what you do. You don't walk around with brothers in church, because appearance of evil, such things. So,
by the way, I want to ask you about that now that you mention it. Dating in church.
I experienced the worst kind of manipulation when it comes to that. So, do you know kuotewa? Kuotewa, the Lord has said that is your husband. Now, this is the thing with girls like us who are in the praise and worship ministry. We were seen as pastors' wives. Okay? So you would be, I'm not going to use the word hooked up. You would be matched with the men of God in church. So you'd hear someone say, hey, Scholar can be a very good wife to pastor so-and-so.
Are they single? I'm a second wife. I'm a
concubine. No. They were young men like us. Yes. But you see, now these are men that are being seen, like in the future, they can be pastors. And a pastor needs a praise and worship leader as a wife, So there was a lot of that manipulation. So, especially women in church. So the Lord has shown me that you and so. So I had a lot of that manipulation that time. And that is one area that I was very strict on, because my mom raised me to be very careful with men. So I used to tell them off. And sometimes I used to tell them off not so nicely, alafu they go and sema me to the pastor, oh, I am proud, I have the spirit of pride, etc, etc. So what
Take
happened?
me through the psyche of a praise and worship leader, because
That's how we are mandated to taking you into the presence of God using art. So the psyche, let's see. The psyche is, well, there is the ego part, because
some I hear can be really suffering, but still up there.
oh yeah, okay. For me, it was different because I had boundaries. I used to be like, I am not going to walk to church and lead praise and worship and then walk back home hungry. So I used to be given an allowance. Okay, but I did hear stories about people who served in ministry, walking to church, not having fare to go back home, people struggling to pay rent and stuff like that. Musicians out here can tell you stories. Especially band members, they can tell you stories. But I had boundaries. I've always had boundaries, and I like money, and money likes me. So I was always very careful about that. But yes, they'll take advantage of you in church if you're not careful. So back to dating. So by the time I was leaving ministry, I was 28, 29. I was involved with someone who was like pushing me. So I ended it and I left, because now I'm not going to leave ministry and then I'm still going to go drag this pastor to be into my life, because I want to heal. I needed to heal because I was very angry. Okay. Now that between 28, 29 to 38, 39 Apple, it took me around 10 years for me to heal some of these church trauma, church wounds. And now I'm 38. Now you're starting now to date. Because at that time, in Anonymous, it's called Anonymous Healing, you are told not to date. So I was going through the healing process. So I was not dating. I had friends, but I did not do it very. So now at 38 now is when you felt like, okay, I think now I can be able to bring another person into my life. And then now Scholar is used to dating people of church. And now she has left and come.
When you're dating people of church, do you have sex with them?
No. How? The women in church will be shown. That is the fear we lived with.
But
we walked in fear.
But you sneaked out.
Of course.
Be truthful.
Yeah, we sneaked out, but it never really used to go all the way sometimes. It's just kissing here and there. Usikike ulikuwa umeonekana, that's what I'm talking about, appearance of evil. Usikike ulionekana na mtu fulani mkiingia entering a certain plot with on Sunday. It will be something else. So that, like you're saying, that is an area I was protected from. So I didn't have what people would call maybe sexual trauma or anything like that. I was protected from that. So that is one thing I am grateful for, being in church. Okay? So now, coming now and dating these other fellas who are not from church. Challenge. These ones are the ones that are now open relationship. You know, I can have 3 girlfriends. I'm not used to that. These are the people of culture who are saying polygamy. I can have 2 wives. So that was another shock for my system, because I was not used to that. But you are right. The church does have that morality element to it that protects us. And I also say, it's not really the people, it's the system. Because inside that church, you will meet amazing human beings like the one that helped you. It is the system that really is the problem, and it has actually captured the people. So that church trauma is where I developed my shadows. Experiences are different. My clients, other people develop shadows from home, others from work, others from school. It varies from person to person. That's why shadow work and inner child healing is very individual. You can't say, now this is what you're going to use for your shadow work session. The first step of doing shadow work is telling me your story. So
I think now is the best time to get into the layers on top of layers.
Yes.
The human as an onion, right?
Yes.
You gave me a very good analogy. How does Ebu say that again?
So we've got so we have Carl Jung in psychology terms, Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud, those names there. So they're the ones who really came up with the layers of our personality or the layers of our beings there. So Carl Jung talked about the collective conscious and the ego and the unconscious. Then Freud talked about the id, the ego, and the superego. I think underneath they were just saying the same thing, but they differed here and there. And then we've got now the spiritual community that has added the metaphysical unconscious and the mystical unconscious, because we are not only the psychological and emotional, we are also the spiritual, right? So what happens, for example, as I've said, the church will focus on the metaphysical, mystical, and then they'll ignore the emotional and psychological. And
Just a minute. I think we can also use the other camera, the small one.
So you'll find maybe in the psychological community, they will focus on the psychological, mental, emotional, and they'll ignore the metaphysical and the mystical.
Yes.
So the goal eventually is to merge all these parts of us, because they are all in conflict with one another. You know, the spiritual, the mystical, the metaphysical can be in conflict with the psychological. So the work is called integrating. The work is to merge all these aspects of ourselves. So the onion, it has all these aspects. So the toppest layer, we would call it as the ego, the identity, what you interact with, the I, the self. We could call it, it's conscious in a way. And the ego has what we call stories, because your ego is developed through your experiences. So the ego comes with its story. So this experience I had has taught me that I am not good enough because I did something and I was shamed, okay? But that is not true, okay? So you have identified with an experience, but it's false, okay? It's just an experience that has told you, just because so-and-so shamed you, now you're not good enough, okay? So what we need to do with the ego, the top layer, we need to confront these false selves. So that is what we call ego stories. So, and they come with those core beliefs. And most of the time, these beliefs are limiting. We call them limiting beliefs. So let's say, for example, a child maybe in class 7, class 8, was told by the teacher, I don't know if you've seen this thing that has been going around, mwalimu wa maths, hapa ni wapi?
Yes.
Yes.
I have my own story about that.
Yes. So your maths teacher told you 1, 2, 3, you'll never amount to anything, what. That experience created an ego story for you. And you walk around, you stepped into high school thinking, maths teachers told me I'm not very good with in mathematics, so chances are I can't be an engineer, I can't be, those careers that involve mathematics. So I'd rather focus on the arts. So your ego story has totally blocked any potential that you might have had, because now you're not going to focus on physics and mathematics. You're going to focus on maybe history. And you see, you never know. So you are walking into high school with a limiting belief. So you have to confront that. Just because the maths teacher said that I am not good in mathematics doesn't really necessarily say I cannot be an engineer. I could even fail, maybe get a B and not get into campus, but I can start with a certificate and do a diploma and go on and on and on until I become an engineer, So these ego stories, if you're not careful, they're going to block your potential. So that is what we call ego work, okay? You have to confront those ego stories. So that's one layer. Then we have the layer of the inner child. The inner child is the part of your psyche that is your childhood self. So this is where we have you were not heard as a child, you were not seen, and you were not loved. Okay? Now this is where you connect it with the attachment theory. Okay? How did you connect with your caregivers in early childhood? All right? Do you have secure attachment? Do you have anxious attachment? Do you have avoidant attachment? Or do you have disorganized attachment? That will show up in, of course, that can be, you can access it for yourself if you're well read, but you can get a coach or a therapist to help you through that. Now, after you figure out your attachment style, now you can start to embark on doing the work. The first thing you need to do is you have to understand that you have an inner child. How many people walking around know that you have an inner child? There is you, the adult you, and then there is the inner child. Okay? Then there is the part of you that has suppressed who you are. Hidden, disowned, self-rejected parts of yourself because you felt that they were not acceptable. That is the shadow self. Okay? So let's make that distinction. The inner child is the part of your psyche that was in your childhood that felt unhealed and loved and not seen. The shadow self is after you figured out this is not acceptable, I cannot do this. You took those parts of yourself and you hid them and you disowned them. Ziko mahali kwa store. Okay? That does not mean they don't influence you. They still come out in your day, in your day to day, and they come out as triggers.
They stalk you.
Yes,
they haunt you.
I call them the ghost you. They are the ghost you. And every day, if you're not healed and you're not conscious enough or you're not aware enough, you are going to meet your shadow every other day.
How do you meet your shadow?
You meet your shadow by self-reflection. Let's start with there. But I think the best way, because we are very busy, you do not have time.
No, I'm saying you talked about you'll keep meeting them here and there.
Yeah.
How does that work? How does that happen?
It's in your day-to-day. For example, what gets under your skin? That's one way of knowing there's a shadow there. That's what we call triggers. Okay? You walk into town, you bump into someone, and then all of a sudden they are angry. It's like they overreact. One of the ways to is overreact, angry and throwing hands. How can you hit me? What? Then you'll meet another person who will have the same experience, but will be like, sorry, boss, and walk. Now that the difference between those two is that there's a shadow with that person who's overreacted, but there's no shadow with this other person. So one way is to check your triggers. Okay, this is where your story comes in. So we ask you questions like, what gets under your skin? What bothers you? Okay? And then you can identify that. So you see, this you can do by yourself. So you can journal that. What gets under your skin? For example, what gets under my skin? Authority. I do not like authority. Why? Do I have a shadow around authority? Of course, church, trauma. So every time, even when, someone is telling me you have to submit and those stories of knowledge, that shadow of hating authority that I got from church is still within, which I'm still healing. I'm still healing even now. Another way is, what do you judge? What do you criticize in other people? How can you judge something you don't know? Can you judge something you don't know? You have to know it in order for you to judge it. So projections are externalized emotions of your own emotions. So so-and-so is like this, he does like this. How did you know? How did you know it's a bad thing unless it's part of you? That's what we call projecting. So every time you find yourself criticizing, judging, all those things, impunity of government, corruption and all those things, are you sure you yourself are not corrupt in your own personal, your own personal life? Okay. So those are like the two major ones you can do on your day-to-day. We call it reactive shadow work. Okay. Watching your reactions and your projections. Another thing you can look at in your day-to-day is what you manifest or the patterns that show up in your life. For example, let's use dating. If you're dating the same kind of a guy over and over, Kenodia was like this. Now Moshiri is like this. Why am I dating the same kind of a guy? It means there's something about them that is within you. That is a shadow that you need to look at. For example, let's early childhood. Maybe you are raised.
Why is this thing that is inside you a craving so much that you are looking for somebody who has the same thing, so that you can feel that you are at peace?
I would call it the mystical aspect of the law of attraction. That's how I would do it. I would say it. I don't think there is a psychological explanation for that. Maybe there is if you talk to psychologists. But from the spiritual perspective, I would use the law of attraction. Only matching frequencies can get along. Okay? So you do not only attract what you're conscious of, you also attract what you are unconscious of, because it is all you. So we say you do not only attract what you want, you also attract what you don't want, which is your shadow, what you've hidden within you. So what is happening around you, which is not good, is what you're manifesting from your unconscious side. And you need to bring that to the surface, integrate it with the conscious, and then now you'll be able to start setting boundaries. Like, okay, I cannot date this because 1, 2, 3, because now you've become conscious of the fact that, oh, by the way, I pick an emotionally available partners because my dad was not emotionally available. Okay? Then when you know that and you heal that, now you'll be able to have boundaries and like, hey, you are not emotionally available for me, so I have to set this boundary. I need someone who is emotionally available. So you see, always going back to your childhood. Okay, I know when I start talking about the law of attraction, the people who think psychologically will be like, now you've gone to the woo-woo aspect of things. But it's all connected, the spiritual, the psychological, and the mental. So that's reactive shadow work. That's your day to day. Then we have now proactive shadow work. Now this is the one you decide, okay, I have a fear shadow. I am going to work on the fear shadow. So usually this is where you get a coach or a therapist and you go through the fear shadow, where it came from. Did it come from attachment in childhood? Did it come from childhood trauma? Were you abused? Were you neglected? The ACEs, the ACEs, advanced childhood environments. It's a psychological term for what you might have experienced in childhood. So raised, like you said, in an alcoholic home, incarcerated, caregiver, needs not met, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, physiological, psychological, etc., etc. So that is where now the coach takes you through everything, depending on the particular shadow. So you can have money shadows, you can have fear shadows.
What are money shadows?
Now, money shadows is how money was viewed in your childhood. That can really affect how you handle money as an adult. For example, someone like me, how I was raised is every time I asked my parents for something, it was given to me. Never had no hakuna pesa. Right? Somebody else on the other alternative was raised, money does not grow on trees. Hakuna pesa. Some kids even are told, you need to go and work so that you can get money. That's how you find kids wanauza njugu kwa barabara, so that they can have an extra coin. Sometimes it's not even their own. They are taking back to the parents. So this shadow is very recent because money is very new. Okay? So how now you're going to... So your experiences with money in your early childhood is going to inform how you're going to deal with money as an adult. Okay? So, for example, you've said, did you have issues with money in childhood?
Yes.
Okay.
A lot.
Yes. So that is why you are even in a dilemma of choosing what we were talking about. What do I do with this and this and this? The priority for me would be very different. When I get a hold of that kind of money, the first thing I do is home, But somebody who was not raised in a state of, we have money, needs are taken care of in the home, be like, wow, jackpot. Let's do luxury. Let's go to Mombasa. It really depends with the messages you are giving as a child about money. Same thing with relationships. What messages were you given as a child about relationships? Okay. Men hit women. You'll grow up like that. Mom pays all the bills in the home. My dad died when I was 14. So it was the mandate now of my mom to raise us. So I did grow up watching my mom actually. Before, my dad used to pay the bills, but now he's no longer there. So my mom was raised paying all the bills. That is the message I got. So I'm the type of a woman, when we go out on a date and the check comes, I'll be like, I'll pay. That's the message I got, that I can pay the bills. And people are very upset when they say things about us because we are that type of a woman. But this is the message we got, that we can actually do it. Versus somebody who was told the man should pay all the bills. So we have this category of ladies right now that I can pay the bills. I'm capable. I can do it because of how I was raised. And then we have the other category of, why should I pay the bills? Why are you coming to my house without shopping? I mean, it's not registering, So the point I'm trying to make is that your childhood really informs your adulthood. And people really don't pay that much attention. So it's important for you to go back to your childhood and figure out what messages were you given about how life should be, how relationship should be, how whatever should be.
So we are done with all the layers.
Yes.
Okay.
The layers.
So I think then we can go into reparenting yourself.
Yes. So now
yeah,
you have realized you have an inner child. And you have realized that your inner child is wounded. You have realized that you have shadows, things about yourself that you have disowned, you have self-rejected. Now you are an adult. So now you're dealing with two parts of yourself at the moment. You're dealing with the adult self and the child self. So what reparenting is the adult you becoming the parent of the child you. And the first thing is just to show up without judgment. The adult you, just show up, look at your inner child and just say, okay, this happened to you. This is not your fault. It's just the environment that you found yourself in. You really did not have control over that. So this is a process that you have to come with a lot of compassion. And forgiveness. Okay, sometimes it's tricky because there are people who say, I don't have to forgive my parents for what they did. But let's use the word compassion to yourself and to your caregivers. Because as we said, your caregivers also were struggling. They had their own struggles, I don't think people become alcoholics out of nowhere. There must have been something that triggered that. So you're showing up for your inner child. So you can do this through various ways. You can do this through calling your inner child. And this can involve visualization exercises. One that I really love is taking a photo of your childhood self. So the way my mom used to take photos when I was a child, she would take a photo and then Nyuma, she writes the year and how old you are. So I have very many photos that are like that. So when I was starting to do inner child, I would take those photos and put them here. So I would visualize. So this is when I was 4. Do I remember? Sometimes you remember, sometimes you don't. Especially if you experience trauma, you might not remember because you really hide those aspects of yourself. It's going to take a hypnotherapist or regression to bring those memories to the surface. So you see, okay, when I was 8 years old, a cousin did this, an aunt did this. Because when you're talking about early environments, we're not talking about mother, father, and children. We're talking about your cousins, your aunties, because they were all involved in the early environment. So if you have wounds around that, one of the ways to bring them to the surface is using that photo practice, okay? And of course, you have your journal. So you can do what you call writing a letter to your inner child, okay? So don't rush the process. So you have your peak, maybe when you're 9 years old and you have identified what happened. Now, I usually tell people, start with a statement of, I see you, my 9-year-old self. Okay? I recognize 1, 2, 3 happened. You're going to bring that to the surface. And then you are going to parent that 9-year-old like you would have wanted to be parented. Okay? I would not have done it this way. I would have done it this way. I apologize for what maybe aunt did or what dad did. I recognize the pain that it caused, etc., etc. Journaling is different for everyone. So you can do that for different ages depending on your experiences. And I need to put a disclaimer here because some of these experiences can be very raw, that meeting them by yourself can be very painful. And this is where we encourage people to go to therapy. I am not a therapist, I am a coach. There's a very big difference. I do not diagnose like mental issues and all that. Only a therapist probably can do that. So as a coach, I might start working with you on inner child work, shadow work, and I can notice that hapa kuna a disorder or something. Maybe an anxiety disorder, something that you're going to need to see a professional. So we have people we refer people to. Because some of the childhood trauma people go through, so I am very quick to notice, okay, this needs therapy. You need to go and see a licensed professional. Another thing when it comes to reparenting is play. Okay, so the nature of the child is play, is bubbly, is up and down, So I sent people to their caregivers when they were young, and I asked them, go ask your mom or your dad, what did you like doing before you were 6 years old? Because chances are you can't remember, okay? So maybe sometimes the parents, they'll say, oh, you loved to dance, maybe you loved to climb trees, or you used to go to your neighbor's house and stay there the whole day. So that gives me an archetype of the kind of a child you were before the conditioning or before the trauma. And then I encourage you to do those things. Okay. So if you used to be the kind of a child who used to climb trees before your mom started telling you, talk up, no. I will start telling you, you need to start hiking because I need you to connect with your inner child. If you're the type of a person who loved singing, dancing, even if you're 40 years old, I will tell you, get into a dancing class to reconnect with your inner child. So I think those are the best illustrations for how you would start to reconnect with your inner child. That is part of dialoguing. It is part of calling your inner child. It is part of reparenting as well. Disclaimer, do not rush these processes, especially if you are wounded. Take it slow, peel the onion slowly, by slowly. Because when you peel onions, it burns your eyes, right? When you start to feel like it's becoming too much, put the onion aside and revert to play, okay? So if bringing things to the surface is becoming too much for you, revert to play. Go play, okay? Then when you feel you're okay, then you can come back and do the dialoguing for each age. That's how I do it. Different coaches maybe do it differently. Yeah.
Amazing. When you were talking about that, I was just thinking about about my childhood. You talked about shadow work and inner work. There's a difference.
No, inner work is umbrella term for all these techniques that make you go within yourself. So Under inner work, there is inner child healing, there is shadow work, there is ego work, there is attachment healing work, there is parts work, there is integral work. The list goes on and on and on and on. So, and then above the inner work, there is now the umbrella of coming into the awareness of self. So when you're coming into the awareness of self, the first step is inner work, and then the rest of it. And then now, after you've done the healing like I did for like that 10 years, you now get to the awakening phase. This is where by now you get into matters of spirituality and the metaphysical and the mystical. So at this point, we are actually dealing with just the psychological, the mental, and the emotional. Yeah, we haven't gotten to the metaphysical and the mystical.
What are they?
Oh, this is now the energy of the aura I was telling you, and then the spirituality.
I would like you to say more about that.
Okay, now, metaphysics is a term that speaks about things that are not physical. Okay, let me use the term. I like to call myself a spiritual scientist. Spiritual scientists, we focus more on the metaphysics side of things than the physical side of things. So scientific materialism is what we see in the mainstream. Your physics, your chemistry, they need proof. Science needs proof, okay? Metaphysics does not really need proof because we do not even have the instruments to measure. Some are coming up, but we don't have, like you cannot measure psychic phenomena. You know, like someone, you just think about someone and then they call you. We call that psychic phenomenon. You can't measure that. So science cannot measure that. That's what we call metaphysics, okay? Which is very much part of us because you can see it in your day-to-day, like intuition is part of the metaphysical, okay? Feeling somebody, like you meet someone and you feel something about them even before they say anything. That's metaphysical. So that is the arena of energy. We can read energies. And that comes together with the spiritual arena of universal laws. You've heard of universal laws. It works on that arena, okay? And it can be very, very confusing for people. So I usually tell people, before you rush into metaphysical and mystical, can we please first sort the psychological and mental and emotional, right? Because when you start to enter these metaphysical, mystical arenas, they are not explained by words. They are more of a sense, a feel, an inner knowing, okay? So it can be very confusing for people. That is why there are cults, gurus who tell people all sorts of things and people follow, etc., etc. So the metaphysical and mystical, they kind of go together because now the mystical part is the culture part of, we are talking to our ancestors. We are doing rituals for 1, 2, 3. We are doing rituals to manifest, etc., etc. So the fact that you do not really focus on the mystical and metaphysical in your day-to-day doesn't mean it's not there. It's there.
Yeah, let's answer the questions as we wind down. Some of the questions that, why did my parents do this to me?
I would say, number one, they had their own struggles, okay? I don't think, until recently, I don't think people have been having parenting classes. My mother did not do parenting classes. My grandmother did not do parenting classes. They did it from the way they saw it being done. And as I have said, just because an ego story is there does not mean it's true. So they could be doing damaging things, thinking that this is just the way it's done. And that is why I really insist on compassion. Compassion for our caregivers, because I really do believe that they had their own internal struggles, that if a parent was abusive, I'm not giving excuses for them, but if a parent was abusive, it's likely they were also abused. So that is why they do these things. I don't want to go I don't want to go to the metaphysical and mystical part of it, but
what is the metaphysical and mystical part of it?
Karma. you've heard about karma, people saying whatever happens to you is your karma and all those things. So we don't want to make those excuses, even if the spiritual community believes in it, that there are people who are meant to come here and suffer. Well, I don't
How
know.
long does inner child healing take?
It depends on your story. Some people have an inner child that is not wounded, so they are fairly conscious because they have not rejected parts of themselves. Some went through childhood trauma, so they have rejected many parts of themselves and they require a lot of healing. So you can have a session, 2 or 3 sessions with someone, and you can also have sessions for months with another person. But as I said, when I find that I'm having to do many sessions with someone, it means I need to switch them over to a therapist. Yeah, because my goal is self-awareness, not mental illness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And who should guide you through inner healing process?
Yes. Now, that connects with the fact that so transformational coaches, our job is to move you from one state of being to another state of being. We do not diagnose you with mental illness, okay? So you have to be very careful who you pick to walk with you in the journey, okay? So for example, you're a Christian, you're born again, and the values of Christianity are important to you. I would recommend a therapist who is a Christian, okay? If you're a Muslim, I would do the same thing because this person understands you. If you are atheist, then you can deal with someone who will not bring in a lot of religious
And spirituality.
yeah, because even therapists are people. So one of the issues I had with Christianity is that when you send someone to go for counseling to a pastor, they'll start saying, oh, let's pray. They will not even mention about the unconscious, the conscious, and inner child and all that. So it really does depend on you, on your story. Depends on your story. Then from your story, then it's determined who should take you through the practice, because it's a practice.
Yeah. I don't know whether how do I shadow work and how can I get inner child by myself? Is that the two questions?
We answered that one.
Yes.
The proactive and
Why am I
reactive.
triggered?
You are triggered because there's a part of yourself that you have rejected. You don't want to see it. So the universe or whoever is in charge will force you to see that thing through triggers. As I said, things that get under your skin are a message. They are telling you there are unhealed parts within you that needs your attention. Okay? So the more you get triggered, the more parts of yourself need healing. Okay? And the best place for this to really show itself is in intimate relationships, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, because now you're in very close proximity. Okay? So what you can do is observe yourself. What triggers you, maybe with your spouse. Inside that trigger, what your spouse does is triggering either a shadow within you or a wound of your inner child. Now, knowing that is the first step, because now you know it is not about my wife, really. It's about wounds that are within me that are childhood. We are blaming our spouses for things that we experienced in childhood. Why are you not giving me enough attention? And this is not even about your wife. This is about the fact that you are raised in anxious attachment, inconsistent parenting. So you carry that into adulthood, okay? So we call this emotional regulation, okay? So triggers, you have been triggered, your wife has triggered you, and you've come into that awareness that this is about. So now you do emotional regulation. Now emotional regulation is whereby now we come to these practices, we say breath work. Because sometimes when your emotions are triggered, you even start sweating. Some people feet there's no power to stand, you get so angry and all that. So you need to regulate your physical body as well. So one of the things I tell my clients is when you get triggered, take a cold glass of water. It will calm you down. I don't know if it's tested scientifically. I don't know, but it works. Or sit down. It calms down your nervous system. Okay? Now, these are practical things you can do with your wife. Or whoever else is triggering you. Another thing you can do is breath work. But now this one is tricky because if your boss triggers you in the office, you're not going to stand and start. It's going to be weird. But breath work is another thing you can do to bring back your nervous system into homeostasis, to calm yourself down. Yeah. But I think that one for drinking water, you try it and then you'll tell me. It really works. Yeah, because I live with my siblings, and all over. So every time we are like in that process of I'll just go and take a glass of water and I'll notice I've calmed down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. It was amazing. What do you do for your clients and how can they reach you?
Right. I am a transformational coach. I help people look at themselves for who they really are, not who they wish to be at the beginning. And then I help them look at the obstacles that are making them not get to where they want to be. And then I give them accountability. I be like a sounding board of you as you try to accomplish these goals. So we define transformational coaching as getting you from one state of being to another state of being, where we examine your thoughts, your beliefs, your assumptions. We examine how you yourself self-sabotage, because sometimes you are your own block, okay? So when you come to me, the first session is usually just about your story. It's like me sitting down and just listening to your story. And then from there, we'll be able to come up with a program. Shadow work, inner child healing usually takes 6 to 8 sessions, depending on the need. And as I said, sometimes I may not do all 8 because I will refer you to a therapist. I can be found on Facebook. That's the only social media I have. I don't have the capacity for all of them. So you can just get into my inbox, Scholar Meek Wanjiru. I always check my messages because most of my clients come from social media and referrals.
Thank you very much, Scholar, for the amazing work that you're doing.
Thank you.
And for showing up at DWJ, Dialogues with Jagero, and sharing this information.
It was a pleasure.
All right. People of the internet, thank you very much for tuning to this episode with Scholar Meek Wanjiru. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, you can always leave a comment. You can give a shout out to her if you want to be in her program. The other thing is that I would ask you that you may, support us by subscribing to this channel, liking us, sharing what you see, what you hear, what you enjoy. All right. And you can follow us on social media, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, now called X. And what else? And YouTube. Until another episode, thank you and bye for now.